Morning, everyone. My name is Denise Lucy, and I'm the Executive Director and Professor of Dominican's Institute for Leadership Studies in our Borowski School of Business. And it's my real pleasure to welcome you to our Business Edge briefing today. This program is a partnership with the Institute for Leadership Studies and the North Bay Leadership Council. We have partnered for over a decade offering this Business Edge briefing series. Together, we've welcomed business owners and organizational leaders to share their strategies and techniques to be resilient and competitive in domestic and global marketplaces. And our goals of these briefings are to ignite innovation, inspire creativity, and increase profits and productivity. And our speakers, they're engaging and exceptional business experts who inspire and educate business leaders to survive and thrive during tough economic conditions. So we welcome you here today, and we want to thank our remarkable community partners who've been with us for all these many years. Thank you, San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, for always being with us and supporting our businesses. And our partners on campus in the Borowski School of Business are the U.S. Commercial Service, which is the lead trade promotion agency of the United States government. It provides counseling and support by trade professionals to help U.S. companies to export and increase sales to new global markets, and they are right in our business school. Thank you so much. Our other partner in the business school is the Marin Small Business Development Center, called the SBDC. It provides no-cost business advising with experts and assisting small businesses with obtaining pandemic funding, HR support, e-commerce, and social media setup. They also offer pivoting strategies and much more training opportunities. Thank you so much, SBDC. Our partner all these years is Cynthia Murray, CEO and President of the North Bay Leadership Council. Cynthia will introduce our presenter and moderate the questions today. We ask that you please enter your questions into the QA portion at the bottom of your page. Cynthia, please tell us about our guest today. Thank you so much for introducing our presenters and facilitating our program.
Thank you, Dr. Denise Lucy. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. North Bay Leadership Council is an employer-led public policy advocacy organization representing the leading employers in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties, and we are very proud to have Dominican University as a member. We want to remind you again to please put your questions in the Q&A section. And we have a fabulous speaker today. She is Sharon Tabois, who is the founder of Communicate with Style Incorporated, a communications consulting and training firm. Sharon is passionate about helping industry professionals develop confidence in their communication skills. Her clients have included managers from Google, Lyft, Airbnb, Visa, Netflix, Facebook, and many others. She's a lecturer for the Strategic Communications course at Stanford Graduate School of Business and a lecturer here at Dominican University of California, where she teaches Leadership Presence and Communication Skills Executive Education Program. Please join me in welcoming Sharon Tabois.
Good morning, and thank you so very much. Spring 2020. All of our in-person workshops were either canceled or postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, all except one course that was a graduation requirement for our MBA students at Stanford University. So what did our teaching team do? We went virtual. So we literally practiced every single lecture with our laptops propped up so we could stand and present virtually to this group of students. It worked. We were able to connect with our students, and the quarter was a success. That was then. But today, October 2023, many of us are still presenting virtually. As more and more companies are offering a hybrid work model, virtual presentation skills are still relevant, and how to make them effective in this space even more relevant. But the challenge is the same 3 years later, 3 years into this pandemic and post-pandemic situation. The challenge is How am I able to really connect with my audience and be effective when none of us are in the same space? And that is exactly what today's Business Edge briefing is going to be focusing on. As we continue, I do welcome you all to use chat. I'm going to be asking you questions along the way. So use chat to respond to my questions, and then we will be using the Q&A portion later. Also, you'll be using your virtual hand to ask a question, and then our moderator will unmute you, so we'll be able to hear you speak. Before we go any further, let's get a little bit of an idea about who's in the room for us. So what challenges do you currently face when presenting virtually? Just write one quick phrase in chat. What's your biggest challenge? Okay. Thank you for that, Veronica. So because chat is disabled, please go ahead and write your response in QA. Okay, I do see some things coming in. So attention, how can we keep this audience engaged when I can't see them? Engagement, that is exactly what many people say, because it doesn't feel like it's possible at times, but we're going to be discussing some key areas. That's the theme that we have going on, engagement, ensuring that the audience is paying attention. Are you even listening over there, especially if people don't have their cameras on? Okay, so what we're going to be discussing, you all, is how we can approach this in 3 distinct areas. First off, connection. How can we connect with our audience when we're not in the same space and give a semblance of if we were in the same room? Then we're going to be moving into some engagement techniques that you can use. I'm specifically saying we can use them for presentations. You can also use them if you have meetings that are going to be virtual or hybrid as well. And then finally, cater. How can you cater your message so your audience doesn't look like this, ready to log off immediately, but instead like this, engaged, participating, and appreciative of their time with you in the virtual space? All right, so again, before we go on a little bit further, I want to make sure I have an idea about who's in the room. So how many of you are currently working in person, hybrid model, or 100% remotely? Please write one word in the Q&A. Virtual, remote, or hybrid. Okay, chat is open again. Thank you for that. So please put it into chat. That's ideal. Okay, definitely seeing a theme for hybrid, mostly in person for some of you. Okay. I think the theme that we're seeing with our group today is definitely hybrid. All right, so what we'll do as I go into some of these tips, I'll make sure that I will highlight some of the tips on what you need to do when you're in person versus in the virtual space. There are some key differences. All right, so starting out with connection. It's pretty simple when you're in person, being able to connect during a presentation. You look around the room, you can feel the energy of those that are there with you. You can watch all of those facial expressions and the body language that you're receiving. But instead, we're going to focus on now, how do we have the opportunity to increase the connection when it's completely virtual or hybrid? I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment so I can see more of our screen. Okay. So starting out with eye contact. And then after we go into eye contact, focusing on both your body language and your voice. These are the ways that you're going to be able to increase that connection. So starting out, how do we go from this, that in-person eye contact, where you are holding the eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds for one person, and then moving on to another person, looking at them for 3 to 5 seconds. This is the recommendation in person. Really sharing your eye contact with everyone and feeling the connection, how do we go from that to this? Where everyone's in their respective spaces, you're trying as much as you can. Key areas that we can do are what I'm going to show you now. And though I can't see you, please do this with me. You're in the comfort of your own spaces, whether you're in the office or at home. Do this with me because it will help you to set yourselves up for when you do this in the future. So starting up, before you have any virtual presentation or any meeting, you want to make sure that you are in the center of your screen. So go ahead and adjust yourself so you can see yourselves. We don't see you, but you can. Go ahead and be your own gauge. You're in the center of your screen. And just like you would use your phone if you were taking a selfie to find your lighting, you want to do the same thing to make sure that your audience can see your features and better engage with you. We're talking about eye contact first. Another helpful tip is I'm currently using a very simple setup, laptop, webinar, and a stationary box that's this tall. I prop my laptop on top of this stationary box, so it's easier for me to make virtual eye contact with you. And the way that you do it is by literally looking directly at the camera. That is eye contact in the virtual space. For example, right now I am looking at Dr. Denise. I'm looking at Dr. Denise's square. So I feel connected to her. But I would bet that you all don't feel connected to me until I look back into the camera. Looking at Dr. Denise, looking at the camera. I know you see a difference. And so the idea here is that you want to engage the camera when you're saying something important, your introduction, your conclusion, a benefit of what you're saying to the audience. Those are the key moments that you want to truly engage with that camera. Then you can look away. You can look at your audience if they're in a space where you can see them. Everybody has their camera on and you can see them, but then re-engage after you've looked away to keep that semblance of we're in the same space going. So that's our eye contact in the virtual space. And then the next part of it is for us to consider how we can go about using our bodies and body language. So research does show that the use of gestures allows your audience to better comprehend complex ideas. And that's because you're giving them two channels of information. You're giving them that auditory, what they're hearing you say, plus the visual. And we already do this when we present and when we talk in regular life outside of a presentation or outside of public speaking. But the idea here is to allow ourselves to get our hands engaged. So for example, I might say, today, we're going to be discussing 3 areas that will help you to be more effective in the virtual space. Virtually, you just want to be sure that you are not too far out. You want to be in, not too far down where no one really knows what you're doing. And you want to be sure that you're facing the audience. So this is ineffective. Nobody knows what I'm doing except me. So making it simple and easy for your audience to engage with what you're saying. When you're talking about something you're really passionate about, it's common for us to do a gentle touch of the heart. This is the part of the content that I'm really excited about presenting to you. Making it more conversational and less of, I'm in the room by myself talking. No, I'm presenting. I am having a conversation with this audience. This is how we can better connect. And then another area that is incredibly important is the voice. I can tell you, the voice is what is going to keep all of you here with me today, along with you keeping your audiences connected to you in the future. There was a time I was working at an international school of English in downtown San Francisco, and I had to do monthly webinars for our global partners. So I had people that were attending early morning from Asia, late night from Europe, and everywhere in between for all of the different regions of the United States. We were aiming to get students for this international school for adults. And one day I was tired and I was doing the webinar like I would do it all the time every month. And I was literally getting sleepy in my own webinar, true story. And I was thinking, if I'm getting sleepy in my webinar, I'm sure all of my participants are nodding off, just like we saw in the picture a couple of moments ago. So at that very moment, I had to be very intentional to add vocal variety. That's where we allow highs and lows, certain levels of intonation, pauses for emphasis, or to add a little drama. That's what's necessary to keep the audience engaged, along with me as the speaker. So when I was saying the same words that I had said before, but with a different vocal variety, I started getting much more engagement from that audience. They were raising their hands, asking questions, and it really worked wonderfully. So the way that you can do that, I'm going to show you visually. This is a fantastic quote here from Albert Einstein. And I'm going to show it to you in 3 different ways. This is without vocal variety. Imagination is everything. It's the preview of life's coming attractions. Have we been there? Have we listened to that person before, where you're just kind of secretly wanting it to be over? There was no vocal variety. So what it looks like visually is now I've taken the same quote, but I want certain words to pop. Those are the ones that are in capital yellow letters, and the slash indicates that I'm going to pause. Now it sounds like this. Imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions. It's landing on you a different way. Same words, but with this different emphasis and pausing, the vocal variety, you're better able to connect with it. Here's another example. Let's say the scenario this go round is that someone is having this realization of the power of imagination. Imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions. I said the same quote to you 3 different ways with 3 different types of vocal variety. And I know that you're going to be responding to it in a different way based on that vocal variety. This is a challenge for you. The next time you have a presentation, a meeting, whatever you have, to think about, okay, this is what I'm going to say, but how am I going to say it so that the main message really lands, that the audience hears the benefit of what I'm discussing? How should it truly land for the effect that you're after? So what questions do you all have about connecting through these 3 behaviors, the eye contact, gestures, and vocal variety? Go ahead and put your questions into chat. Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, so when you have glasses on, and sometimes it does, I do swap out, depending, like today I have a little bit of a glare, right? So sometimes, Lynn, knowing the time of day can be helpful. Like if you know that the sun is going to be directly in front of you and you have the option of doing a contact, you could go that route, or just be really intentional with finding a little bit of time ahead of your presentation to find your angles. Okay, so what I mean by that, if I turn my head here, there's a little less glare than when I'm spot on. And then just hold that eye contact a little bit longer. That way it can still be connecting with your eyes and not a glare that we may have going on with our glasses. Kim, so do you recommend standing? Sometimes. It really depends on the person. When I'm doing individual coaching, sometimes people don't come to life until they stand up. And we used to stand up at the beginning of the pandemic, but now we're a little bit into our new norm, at least for myself. But when you know it's a high stakes presentation or a high stakes meeting, and you know that you're going to feel like yourself by standing, I say go for it. The way that you'll be able to determine is by practicing both ways. Sit down, practice it, and then stand up practicing. And if you feel more confident because you're standing and like your voice is projecting like it would in person, definitely go with the stand. How do you as the presenter remain engaged, connected to your audience when you are just looking at the camera? Okay, so you see how many times I keep asking you all to participate with me? Typically I see you all, but because I don't see you today, we're using chat. So I make sure that you're still listening to me. We can keep this conversation going, though I can't currently see you. So I'm really relying on the technique of using chat and pausing to see what questions you might have to make it feel more like a conversation. A better way to do introductions to get people engaged, depending on the amount of people in your group. If it's a small group, maybe 10 to 12 people, you could give parameters. Please, let's do quick introductions, 30 seconds or less, and have a specific prompt that they're answering. If you really knew me, you would know this. Or the best thing I ate over the past 24 hours was this, along with the name and the company that they're coming from. But very organized so that no one starts telling us about 3 minutes worth of content when you really only have time for 30 seconds. All right, you all. We're going to continue. And now we're going to be focusing on engagement techniques. I was happy to see that a lot of you are working in a hybrid model. So I have some tips that you can use for hybrid specifically, and then when you're completely virtual. But before we get into my suggestions, what are you currently doing? What techniques are you using right now for audience engagement, either for presentations or meetings? You can go ahead and put a quick sentence in chat. Okay, ask a specific question and share responses. Definitely. Same thing that I'm doing, Linda. Wonderful. Using chat for answering questions. Relevant multimedia. Absolutely. Okay. Questions, games, humor, surveys, right? We have a lot of best practices because we've been doing this for some time. So the idea behind this section is to ideally give you something new. Breakout rooms. Absolutely. I can tell you, I was in a session, it was a train the trainer. There were 100 of us. And I was thinking, surely we're not going to be in breakout rooms. There's 100 people. We were in breakout rooms, pairs. And I left that breakout room feeling so connected to my partner that was way on the East Coast and wanting to connect with her online, offline, find her on LinkedIn, meet up if I were in the area, all of those things because of the power of that breakout room. Polls. All of these are great ways to engage our audience. So when it comes to something that we can add, what you're already doing is using chat and all of these different means. But if you really want to get some voices, one thing that we would do, for example, would be, okay, I heard you say, Lisette, have relevant and personable conversations. Lisette, would you be comfortable coming off mute and giving us an example of one of these personable conversations that you've had recently? So at that moment, Lisette has the option to expound upon what she said in chat. And then we would hear from Lisette. And then we would go back to chat and see what those other responses were. So for example, we have Daniel S. that said, questions, games, humor, and surveys. Ooh, Daniel, I'm looking for new games always. Are you comfortable coming off mute and letting us know what game you played at your most recent team event? And then Daniel could come off mute, share a little bit more about this game that was a success with the team, and we would proceed from there. The idea behind this activity is taking what we're already doing, chat, and then fishing for either themes or something that we haven't heard before, and allowing people in your presentation audience, your meeting with your colleagues, to share a bit more. It works twofold, depending on if you have introverts or people that deem themselves extroverts or introverts. Everyone can participate in chat. That's really low stakes. But then when you allow people to amplify what they've said by coming off mute and sharing their ideas, that's when you can really get that engagement in a new way. And it also works if people want to process internally first, instead of having to immediately come off mute and say, oh, what are your thoughts? They have a chance to really warm themselves up and then speak clearly. So that technique is called chat and fish. You can use this for virtual, 100% virtual, or hybrid. The idea with hybrid is that, and when I say hybrid, meaning some people would be attending in person and other people would be attending virtually in that space, everyone can use chat from their own laptops. So you would have your own chat space and no one would be wondering who is saying what. So that's chat and fish. And then we have table tennis. Now this is recommended for hybrid. You see in the image here that this presenter has some of her colleagues online and others in person. It's essentially taking our same technique of chat and fish, but then you're going to be really intentional that you don't forget the people that are joining remotely. It's happened before. It has definitely happened before where, oh, I forgot to check in with my online audience. Being intentional to start with a question or comment from your remote audience, discuss as a group, then get another question or comment from the in-person. And so you're going back and forth like a table tennis of sorts to be able to allow the diverse ideas to come into the room. And both of these techniques actually came from one of my colleagues at Lighthouse Communications. He deemed both of these, or coined the phrases chat and fish and table tennis. And we've used it and we've worked together, and it's really useful for engagement in new ways. And another thing that's kind of fun about it, to let you know that it truly does work outside of this space, we were recently helping a director at a top Silicon Valley company that a lot of you know, and he was preparing for a 200-person all hands. And he wanted it to be engaging. And so which technique did he use? Chat and fish. Everybody wrote the response, and then he pulled out a couple of those responses to continue that conversation. Oh, I see what you're saying here, Ari. As part of your agenda for most meetings, asking each participant to provide a quick status update. Absolutely. And so anything that you can do, and sometimes you need parameters depending on how much your team likes to really discuss. Okay, everybody's going to give us a 2-minute update. And so everyone knows, and that can warm us up if we consider ourselves to be introvert. Okay, I can prepare myself. I have 2 minutes to talk about what is going on in my area of responsibility. So chat and fish, table tennis. Can you all see yourselves using either of these engagement techniques? Quick Y or N in the chat. Y for yes, N for no. Cool. All right. And what questions do you have? Any additional questions at this point about engagement in this space? Okay, so now we're going to go into our next section on how we can cater our content to where our audience wants to listen to what we have to say. Okay, actually, before we go back, let's go back a moment. We do have some time. So any suggestions about engaging with a shy audience? Okay, yeah, so when we have a shy audience, and sometimes that happens, one thing that's really useful is what we call a warm call. So for example, if I said, yeah, Daniel, yeah, tell me about what your team was working on last week, just out of the blue, Daniel would be thinking, okay, why is Sharon picking on me, calling on me? I wasn't volunteering. So instead of doing that cold call, I would do a bit of a preview, give some context before I start checking in on my audience. So for example, I could say, we're getting ready to have a discussion about what priorities your team has been working on over the past quarter. We're going to be going around the room and then hearing from every department. So we're going to start out with Daniel. This is considered a warm call. That's one way you could do it, because I'm letting people know what's happening or what's going to happen in a moment, not immediately. And then the other way that we can do a warm call is last meeting, we discussed our top priority for the second quarter of the year. Now we're going to be showing you the updates of what's happened over the past couple of months. And then Daniel, I know you had a question about engagement with my team. So I would come back to you and hear what your thoughts are. So that's another way to do a warm call where I'm providing even more context, reminding Daniel that, hey, I remember the conversation that we had a couple of months ago, and then following back up with him. So that way, no one's just thrown off and put on the spot. What do you do if you know you aren't connecting? You do a content check. And that's what we're getting ready to talk about. A lot of times we're not connecting. It could be because the content is not for that audience. Maybe something needs to be done to refresh the content or really solidify what the objective is. Why are we even meeting today? Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? So we're going to talk more about that, the content check, Cynthia, and then we'll see if that might work in the situation that you're describing. How do you gracefully release someone you tagged who doesn't want to participate? Absolutely. Just say thank you and then keep it moving. So for example, if I say, oh, Lynn, would you like to come off mute and tell me about the time that this may have happened to you? You could respectfully say, oh, no, thank you. Okay, thank you. Let's keep it moving. We don't want to linger there, right? And then just go on. Maybe you find another person to volunteer. And if you don't have any volunteers, you can still wait for 7 seconds. See if another person has a question or comment. If not, go on to your next point. Additional questions before we move on? All right. So with the catering your content to your audience, people will listen when they can identify that they were in your mind as you put the message together. It's not just a cookie cutter, whoever my audience is, I'm just going to say this, that you've taken that time to do what we call a content check. But before we go into that, it's one of my favorite parts of this about really getting the message for the audience in front of you. Before we even get into that, how do you all currently determine which content to omit from a presentation? Go ahead and put what you're currently doing in chat. And a quick story about this, I was working with a manager at a company and she was inheriting a new team. We were going through some leadership communication skill development, doing a bit of role playing. How would you say if your direct report responded this way? What would you say? And I asked her, how would you give this same presentation to your manager's manager? Because she was preparing for a really high stakes talk. And so she was going through everything that she said or would say to her direct reports. But then she said, oh, well, if I'm saying it to my manager's manager, I'm not going to say that. And I'm not going to say that. So it really allowed her to trim what each audience needed to hear. Not everything that she could potentially say, but what the audience needed to hear. There is a difference. Okay. Do pre-presentation survey. Practice thinking about audience and edit. Absolutely, Lynn. And so this next tool that I'm going to be dropping in chat in just a moment will just allow you to build upon what you're already doing. It makes us think about the audience first. So many times we think about, okay, I have a presentation. What am I going to say? Instead of thinking about who is going to be there. Who am I going to be talking to? So it's a reframe about how to approach the entire preparation process. So what I'm doing now, you all, I'm going to drop in chat the content check. This is a PDF that you all can use after this webinar and beyond. Please do use it. It's a really useful tool for you to prepare yourself. Take 8 minutes. Go through this content check just to make sure that your message is relevant and applicable to your audience. So I'm going to drop this in for you. Okay. All right, here it is. And we're going to be looking at this together. A couple of key things I really want to highlight for you all. So after you determine who your what your topic is, and once you start thinking about who your audience is, you may not know 100% of who your audience is going to be, but do what you can as far as aiming to define them with at least 3 adjectives. So with your topic, are they interested? Are they skeptical? Are they really busy and don't have a lot of time to even be there listening to the presentation? Are they technical, non-technical? Are they a team, or are they a bunch of people working together who've never met before? All of these will help you as you're determining what you want to include in your presentation. So the first step, get 3 adjectives down. And then the relevance. Why is your topic important to them? Not you, not you. We really want to be audience focused. Audience-centric messaging is what we're after. So how can you determine what they care about and how is that in your message? You really want to get clear on that before you go any further. The next part about the objective. Why am I speaking? I like to ask this question when we have these recurring meetings. How is this Tuesday's meeting different from last Tuesday's meeting? Okay, maybe you're talking about the same project, but you might be 1 week further along in your data collection or in your overall progression to the goal. And then also, what do you want your audience to do after they listen to you? Do you want them to start doing something? Stop doing something? Consider a change of course. Are you aiming for collaboration? A new deadline? Now, when it comes to the second suggestion here about considering a change of course, this is where you really want to be sure you know where you are in the asking process. And be realistic. At the end of your presentation or the end of your meeting, are you expecting people to take what you said for behavioral change, stop using this process, and they do that immediately? Or is it more of the beginning of the asking process? For example, I don't want you to start tomorrow. Better example, water bottle. I'm encouraging all of you when you log off today to stop using paper cups and everyone go get specifically a thermal flask. That is my challenge to all of you. No, that's not what I'm coming on here to do if this were what my message was about. Instead, I would know where I am in the asking process and say, consider the next time you reach for that paper or plastic cup, consider the impact that it's having on our ecosystem and the turtles that you say are your favorite animal. Consider instead getting a reusable water bottle to better help the environment and keep your water with you at all times. This is more of a consideration. So maybe my audience goes away, they're going about their daily lives, and they're considering something's planted in their mind, but I'm not asking them to do a hard start or stop right after my presentation. That's what I mean by the asking process, the whole cycle. Time. How much time do you have for your presentation? Do you need to set aside time for Q&A? Something for you to think through. You can use this content check if you're going to be speaking for 15 minutes or 5 minutes. Time got cut. You only have 5 minutes. It allows you to highlight those ultimate points that need to be said, which are the part with the content. What are the 3 most important parts, the 3 most important points that your audience needs to hear? And this is where you really need to do the work to make sure that every piece of content is relevant to your overall objective and that audience. Otherwise, it's just extra. And we're playing into the rule of 3. You don't want to overwhelm and bombard your audience with the 19 tips for successful presentations. We're not doing that. The 3 most important, and you can save those other 16 points for a different conversation at a different time or a completely different audience. So prioritize and reprioritize what you're saying so that your audience hears what they need from you. Emotion. Sometimes we don't think about this, but there is a place for emotion when we're having a business presentation. How do you want your audience to feel as a result of your presentation? And I put from to because maybe you know this from your audience analysis, thinking about them in those adjectives. Maybe you know that your audience is stressed or on the verge of burnout or really inspired because you just had an off-site and everybody's ready to start working again. Whatever it is, however they're starting. So for example, from discouraged, oh wow, this is a lot more work on my plate, to hopeful because someone came in, did a presentation about why we're doing this different new work and the benefits behind it. So from discouraged to hopeful, for example. It's a really good element to think through because it leads us to our next part, which is the hook. The hook is where you are able to say something to make your audience think, whoa, I never thought of it that way. And long after the presentation is over, your audience remembers this part of your message. Even today, you all are not going to remember everything that I said. Definitely not. But what you will remember are the hooks. And the hooks are what make it sticky. Those are stories, analogies, interesting data. Notice I'm saying interesting data, not all the data, not all the data that's been researched over the past 6 months. No, we're not sharing all of that. But the most important, interesting nugget, that's what you share with your audience. Maybe there's a visual if you're going to be using slides. Testimonial. The reason I have testimonial here, sometimes we can have people that are aiming to get a team to use a new process. There's a lot of pushback. It's useful to share, well, this other team didn't want to use this new process either, but now they're saving 55 people hours every week because of this new process. It helps to encourage people, okay, well, I'll give it a try if that's the case. You could use a quote if something really sticks and just holds on to the message and mission of your team or department. And again, this is what's really going to allow your audience to emotionally connect and remember your content long after your talk is finished. So with these questions, oh, and then on your page, it's not on my slide, but on the very, very bottom, we have the part about the main message. And this is where you, as the preparer of the content, determine what is your main message. I'm not just up here be talking. No. What is my main message that I'm aiming to deliver to this audience? So that is the content check. So before we get into our biggest takeaway, are there any questions about this content check? Anything that needs to be explained a little bit more? Go ahead and put those questions into chat. Okay, well, I have a question for all of you. Of these handful of questions from the content check, is there one that you don't typically consider before you start preparing a presentation? Which one is that? Put that in chat, just one word in chat. For example, relevance. I just think about myself. I don't really think about my audience typically, but now I'm going to, that kind of thing. Emotion. Absolutely. Thank you to Daniel, Ilana, Norwisha. We're noticing the theme here, the hook. And that's the thing. We were talking about creativity and how that's one of the aims for the Business Edge briefing, to allow creativity and innovation to come through in the workplace. You can get really creative with the hook. And honestly, when it comes to the story, truly, you could tell a story about anything as long as you create the bridge to what your main message is. Otherwise, it's like, okay, well, what are you telling me that for? So a real connection, the bridge, is key for any story that you're using to work. And I will say that it's imperative for you to explicitly state what the message and the connection to your story is. You don't want to leave that up to people's imaginations because they could create some other thing that wasn't your intent. So just say what you mean. I tell you this story because water bottles are really economical and useful for the environment. Instead of, okay, she wants me to buy something, people creating their own ideas. It helps you to cut down when you're really clear. Brevity, the hook. People remember better a relevant story. That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jairo. All right. So now you all, we are moving into our final Q&A portion. If there are additional questions that you all have, we have some time to go ahead and respond to those.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon Tabois. That was a fantastic presentation. And I have a few questions and happy to take in more if we see them. But I really thought that you gave us a great tip on the rule of three. Some other things that might be that I'd like you to comment on are sort of, where do we get overload in communication? Too long? Like, how long should we expect somebody to listen to a speaker, a talking head? Is there a rule of thumb on that?
Okay, so there's a rule when it comes to virtual meetings specifically. Honestly, it can apply for in person, but the rule of 5 minutes. 5-minute rule is where every 5 minutes, you want to be asking your audience to do something. Right now, I have you going into chat. That's what our option is today. But in person, it could be raise your hand if this, or turn to your partner and say that. Just something, because of the adult attention span and how short it's getting over time. It's getting shorter and shorter, research is showing us. So something to keep that engagement going. I would say that it's really going to depend, Cynthia, on the culture of your company. I know there's some that are like, okay, our meetings are either 25 minutes or 50 minutes, nothing in between, right? So seeing what your culture is doing and then allowing it, instead of being, for example, the 30 minutes, going for the 25, so that you're respecting people's time and they can go into another virtual room or walk down if you're on a campus of a university or a company, allowing that time there. So only use the amount of time that's absolutely necessary. The shorter, the better.
So the other thing is the frequency of meetings, especially Zooms. And I know many of us feel burnout if we've had 2, 3, 4, 5 Zooms in one day. So is there a rule of thumb about how much people should be expected to really be able to engage well if the number of Zooms per day?
Definitely. So if it's possible, and again, it's going to go back to the company culture because we're noticing so many different things. If it's possible for you all to be like you are today with your cameras off and everyone has agreed to that, that's fine. It's less having to be on, if you will, less burnout is there. But I will say, if there's those moments where someone needs to make a decision or you need to influence or inspire an audience, it would be good for you to, in pre-work, the calendar invite, we're requesting to have cameras on for this, just so people can prepare themselves differently and manage the expectation. Okay, my first Zoom of the day, I'm going to be on camera, but after that, I can relax a little bit and just have a conversation. So as much information as possible, because I know sometimes you just have to have those meetings, it would be recommended to have no more than 4 hours. That's still a lot. But if it has to go beyond that, seeing if off camera for some and on camera for the essential ones is possible.
So what is there a better time of day to do Zoom meetings? Like, we know, like, having an in-person meeting after lunch is like a tough one because everybody's sleepy from eating. So is there any rule of thumb on best time to schedule a Zoom?
My personal preference, this isn't research back, this is just me. My personal preference is either late morning or early afternoon, especially because I'm dealing with people in different time zones. So being respectful as much as possible. However, I will say this, for those of you that are working with a global audience, nobody wants to always be the person having to wake up at 6 a.m. or the person staying on until 7:30. So rotating, okay, this week, Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be up early. And then next week, it'll be our partners in APAC and Asia that are going to be up early, just to share in that burden of time scheduling.
So one of the things that I keep reading is that for managers of remote workers, there's more challenges than perhaps for the remote workers. And is there some tips for the managers to feel like they're better able to make sure that the employees are feeling connected and are visible? Because a lot of employees worry that if they're not in the office, are they going to get the same kind of promotions and credit and those kinds of things?
Right. And that is absolutely a huge challenge that's going on right now. And what I would recommend, based on what I've seen with the clients that we're working with, is though you have a remote team, is it possible once a quarter, once a half a year for everybody to be in the space? That same space for an offsite type of situation, so you can get from this two-dimensional situation in person with each other to strengthen the relationship before you go back to being 100% remote. That would be a recommendation. Sometimes it works. Sometimes people want to stay, of course, 100% remote for whatever reason. So that would be one thing to try. And then also, you all may have noticed we were going from slides showing to slides down. That's when it really does allow us to look like we're having more of a conversation instead of just one face up in the corner. So things like that, small things to make it feel, once again, like you are having that conversation in person. I'm trying to read it a little bit further, Cynthia, Janine.
I wanted to bring out, Lynn asked, tips for post-presentation feedback and or to reinforce learning. So after the Zoom, are there some good tips?
If you have a slide deck, not sharing the entire deck, but the most important 3 slides, that's useful, giving them a visual to take away with. Or it could be a short email summarizing of what you all discussed. And if there's any action items, really saying, okay, this person is doing that, so everything is very clear. Is that helpful, Lynn? The post-presentation response? And reinforce learning, honestly, it's really useful when we're able to go back in there 4 weeks after a session. What are you applying? How can we make some tweaks to make it for your organization? That helps as well.
I would imagine too that it's really important to give your contact information as a presenter. So if people have follow-up questions and they didn't want to ask them in the meeting, but want to follow up, that they have ability to reach you?
Definitely.
And then what about some maybe differences in communication styles? You know, some people are more visual, some people are more audio, and all those kinds of things. How do you make sure you're sort of tapping into some of those different styles? You in your 3 points, eye contact, gestures, and vocal variety, but is there a little more nuance to that?
There can be, most definitely. So while I had questions, for example, in the deck, another tool that I would typically use just to keep it very inclusive would put that same question in chat. So it's reinforcing visually what's going on. Or if you're dealing with people that are more auditory, reading a question instead of just having it on a screen. So things like that. Also, aiming for more pause, just as people process differently, some internally, some externally, more pause to allow whatever learning and thinking style for people to be able to flow in that as well.
Well, I'm sorry that we're out of time. You've been absolutely fabulous, Sharon. I've enjoyed this presentation. I'm sure we all have, and really excited to be able to put to work some of the tips you gave us. So thank you so much. I also want to tell everyone, if you enjoyed this session, you can consider enrolling in Sharon's Leadership, Presence, and Communication Skills, a 2-day executive education program at Dominican that Sharon is teaching in. And we just put the enrollment information in the chat, so please take advantage of that. We also encourage you to join us for the upcoming Leadership Lecture Series presented by Dominican in partnership with Book Passage. We have one this week, October 13th at 7 o'clock with the fabulous author, Barbara Kingsolver. I'm reading her book right now. and November 17th with David Brooks, who just put out a really interesting column on why we should keep Joe Biden. So both fabulous authors that you can get to know, and you can purchase tickets through the link that's also in the chat. And I want to thank Dr. Denise Lucy and all the staff at Dominican, as well as our other partners, for joining us today. This has been our great joy to bring these kinds of business edge briefings to you, and we will hopefully have you join us at our next one. Thank you so much for coming today.